Lowest part of the body is bulbocavernosus. Do you all agree? Yes, I can see Achal around there. Achal, do you agree? If you agree, put your hand up. So is it up or down? Bulbocavernosus, you agree with that? You're thinking. Nobody? So Sai Bhavana, can you tell us why bulbocavernosus? So yes, the reflexes come down from the lower part of the body and then they start going to the upper part. So the lowest part of the body, as per Sai Bhavana, is bulbocavernosus. Could anyone else like to tell us about any other lower reflex if there is any? Huh? Yeah, somebody here? Alekia, you're saying something? Sanya saying something? Anyone? Supriya? Nobody? Which? Yeah, somebody have written here. Plantar reflex. Good, Simran. And Shivani is saying plantar reflex. So you're saying Sai Bhavana is not right. So Shivani and Simran, what is the root value of plantar and plantar reflex? Is it the lowest part of the body, the plantar? Yeah, Shivani is typing something. Simran, we are not able to see. Not able to see Simran here. Shravani has written S1. Yes, Shivani has written S1. L5 S1 Srivalli. Very good. Yes, you're right. This is the root value of plantar. So, do you think Sai Bhavana is wrong in saying bulbocavernosus? What is the root value of bulbocavernosus? Is that lower than plantar or higher than plantar? It is lower than plantar. It is S3, S4. So the lowest part of the body is the anal canal and the bulbocavernosus area. It is not the plantar. The leg is just an offshoot from the higher part of the body. So the two poles of the body are the cranium and the anal canal, the stomoidium and the proctodeum. So yes, thank you Sai Bhavana for this good answer. And yes, I mean, this is a very typical exam question they ask you. It's a kind of a twister, you can say. But once you know it, you will always know it. Yeah, we won't even ask you because we now know that some of you know it. Alright, so we now come to these patients. Most of them did not show anything expected. Like in the reflexes, we would have either expected in the acute phase loss of reflex or hyperreflexia because the classical upper motor neuron on one side. And we would have expected the plantar to be upgoing. But none of these patients showed that, isn't it? So none of these patients are your typical stroke that you know of. Either they have recovered completely from the stroke, but what kind of patient would have stroke at the age of 23 and 41? That is also slightly odd, isn't it? Young stroke at this age and recovering so fast. So any stroke which recovers very fast has to be an embolic phenomena. Like an embolus is going or a thrombus is going there and again is shifting so that the recovery is very fast. But do you think they're really having this kind of a thrombotic embolic stroke without any source of thrombus? So the commonest source of cerebral embolism. This is again a very typical NEET MCQ as well as final MBBS question. Commonest source of cerebral embolism. Yes, Vinila was saying something. Yes, so atrial fibrillation is the cause, but the source is cardiac. The commonest source of cerebral embolism is cardiac source. So it is a LA clot or a LV thrombus, depending on what age you are. If you're a young age patient like the 23-41, and if you've got LA clot, and what kind of patient would have a LA clot? Those who would be having a cardiovascular system problem. So now Dr. Vinila and Dr. Supriya have examined the cardiovascular system. They did not find any palpable abnormal apex beat, no tapping apex, no palpable second heart sound. In fact, most of them have actually felt all these things in real patients in the last few weeks, which unfortunately we are not getting the opportunity, but your time will also come. So they have actually felt a tapping apex, tapping pulmonary sound, and then a parasternal heave, and then they also heard in some cases mitral stenotic murmur. So none of these things are there in these two patients. So they don't have any cardiac source for a thrombus or an embolus. So we are not even able to think of a thrombotic or embolic stroke here. So what are the other possibilities of hemiparesis in such patients? So this is what we would like to know from you. What are the other possibilities? And what is the most likely place of lesion in a person of hemiparesis? What are the different anatomical sites where a patient can have hemiparesis? Okay, Simran saying 23 had an episode of trauma before. Yes, agreed. So trauma causing hemiparesis, would it be transient and recovering and recurring so many times? Maybe possible, but how? Good, good thought, Simran. So any other anatomical localization? So let's go systematically. Let's start with anatomy and then we'll go to pathology, etiology. So where is the location for a hemiparesis? This you have to tell us. Commonest location. Yes, the interns are already telling that, and the hint is that it starts with the name intern. Yes, internal capsule, clearly, right. So internal capsule is the commonest location for a hemiparesis. But what are the other areas clearly, can you tell us? Yes, this is statistically commonest, so we always say internal capsule. Because most of the time it is in the internal capsule. So if it is like that, which vessel is affected and why is that vessel commonly affected? Why not the other vessels? And what are the other areas which can be affected? Yeah, even Navin is saying internal capsule. What are the other common areas which can be affected? So yes, any part of the brain and spinal cord can be affected to cause hemiparesis. So it can start from the entire motor parietal lobe, which has the leg area, the arm area, the face area. Somebody is saying reticular formation. Reticular formation, does it contain the arms, legs, and the face? You know, so to cause hemiparesis, the face, the arm, and leg has to be involved. So it has to be affected in one place where all these things are together. Yes, I would agree with brainstem. Yes, if you say reticular formation, you mean the brainstem, because reticular formation is an area of the brainstem which has got a separate function. Like it is a reticular activating system. It deals with awakeness, consciousness. That is its function, but not motor function. So motor function is dealt even in the brainstem with the same fibers which start from the pyramidal cells or beds in the cortex. So everything starts from the parietal lobe in the cortex, the motor lobe, and everything comes and like a ponytail, it aggregates in one place called the internal capsule, where you put a ribbon around the ponytail, isn't it? That is the internal capsule, that ribbon. And after that, through the internal capsule, it goes to the midbrain, then the pons, then the medulla oblongata. It's the same pyramidal tract which is coming from the cortex. It is going down. So reticular activating system is ascending and this one is descending. So it descends to that and goes to the spinal cord. So any of these areas can be involved. This hemiparesis can be because of a parietal lobe, entire lobe can be involved, or the coronal radiator can be involved just below that, or the internal capsule can be involved, or the pyramidal tract in the midbrain can be involved, in the pons can be involved, in the medulla can be involved, or it can be involved in the spinal cord. Now tell us, anybody, if it is a spinal cord problem, what kind of hemiparesis lesion would you have seen? I mean, let's say the hemiparesis was due to spinal cord. So what all would be the features of a spinal cord hemiparesis? This is a question which you may have come across in a first year MBBS when they taught you a certain syndrome. Hint. Brown-Sequard. Very good, Divya. Brown-Sequard syndrome. So what are the features of Brown-Sequard? Because of a spinal cord hemisection of the cord, you can get hemiparesis. So where does that hemisection have to be? So to affect the biceps and the forearm, it has to be above the C5. So C4, C3, you can get, if you have somebody cut your C3, C4, you will get a paralysis of the left upper limb and lower limb. Actually, it can even be in the C5, where the biceps will be affected as a lower motor neuron, you will not know, and everything else below that will be upper motor neuron. So if you cut even in C5, your biceps will only be affected, you won't have the reflex and it will be more wasted. But below that C6, C7 and your lower limbs, they will all be upper motor neuron. All will be jumping, exaggerated, the tone will be high, plantar will be extensor. So that is Brown-Sequard, the motor component. What will happen to the sensory component? The sensory component will be in the opposite side because all that lateral spinothalamic tract, it goes to the opposite side. So the opposite side, the pain and temperature will go. And what will happen to the other sensations like vibration and position sensation? That will be again in the same side, where they arise from the same side. So the vibration position sense on the same side will be disappearing. The pain temperature will disappear on the opposite side, and the motor power will go on the same side. So this is spinal cord. Very good, Divya and Pawan and Rishik. Okay, so that is spinal cord. And what else can it be above that is brainstem. So everything in the brainstem which will tell you, okay, this is brainstem, this is pons, this is midbrain, this is medulla. So all these are separate syndromes. Like Brown-Séquard, you have midbrain syndrome, you have Pontine syndrome, you have medulla oblongata syndrome, known by the different interns who describe them in their internship. So anybody can tell us just a gross general knowledge what to expect in a brainstem hemiparesis. Yes, very good. So we are not saying, so Supriya is telling us the involvement of cranial nerves, obviously. So in midbrain, Swarupa, what cranial nerves will be involved? Swarupa, Achal, Shivani. In the midbrain region, what cranial nerves will be involved? Yeah, we can type also. Yeah, Simran is saying 9, 10, 11, 12. That is in the middle oblongata, yes. Achal is saying 9, 10, 11. That is in the middle oblongata. And Vijay Kumar is saying 5th and 6th in midbrain. That is actually in the pons. 3rd, 4th, Navin and only 4th only. Yeah, so 3rd and 4th Navin is right. In the midbrain, yes. And pons, 5th and 6th. And 7th, isn't it? And if you go above, internal capsule only 7th. So what is this? Why only 7th in internal capsule? And when you go down to the brainstem, you have all this. So that is one question we will leave it to you as homework. When you come back tomorrow, I mean the next class, we will expect an answer to that one. Now we have had some general knowledge around the anatomical location. So what do you think? Okay, let's say that the anatomical location is internal capsule here, and we have gotten an MRI, and actually the MRI is showing a lesion in the internal capsule in both these two patients. Although the patient doesn't have any paralysis, but there is a lesion. So again, your homework is to discuss further as to why they have that. What could be the reason? Actually, the etiologic diagnosis is probably not vascular stroke. So what are the other etiologic diagnosis possibilities here? Can anybody tell us? Other than stroke, what can happen to a person who has hemiparesis? So we'll be rounding up in 1 or 2 minutes. So you've got just 1 or 2 minutes. So the other things which can happen is you can have a brain tumor in the same area of the brain, internal capsule, or the brainstem, or even the cortex, or you can have a demyelinating lesion. So it's very simple. Either there's a tumor, or there's a demyelination, or there's a degeneration, or there's a trauma, as Simran or somebody else had said. But then trauma can it have recurrent hemiparesis? That is something which again is a homework. Now, so all these things can cause hemiparesis as etiologic possibilities. Not just a vascular stroke, which we are commonly given to believe. It's not just vascular stroke, but it can be an infection also. Like what kind of infection will accumulate in the internal capsule and cause stroke? I mean, cause hemiparesis? A brain abscess. A brain abscess. It could be an infection like a parasite, a neurocysticercus, or it could be a tuberculoma. So all of them can cause hemiparesis. It could be a toxoplasmosis because of an underlying HIV positive patient. So all these are etiologic possibilities. So in this patient, we had a diagnostic uncertainty. We still don't think it is a vascular problem. We think it's a demyelinating problem, and we'll be closely following up these two patients to see how to provide therapy from them later. Dr. Raveen is actually doing a thesis on such patients, Dr. Raveen, Dr. Sai Charan, and we will let you know as to what is the outcome. So we will have just a quick summary of what we learned today, the learning points. So Dr. Sai Charan will round up the summary of what we learned today.